Industry leaders and executives typically worry most about the success of their own firm. Their attitude to the problems of other companies is closer to schadenfreude than to sympathy. Recently, for example, I witnessed some cynical pleasure being taken when chewing pharmaceuticals' aggressive pricing tactics got them into trouble. But evolutionary science would tell us that the whole industry should be worried about this episode and similar trends in pricing policy. As usual with this column, let me explain the science and then I'll come back to you with practical implications. Evolution is a selection process in which the environment picks the winners. For decades, we've considered that the unit of selection is, in Richard Dawkins' words, the selfish gene. But more recently, evolutionary scientists have suggested that gene-level selection alone is not enough to explain the evolution of, for example, the behaviour of ants and other social animals. The father of sociobiology, Edward Wilson, and his colleagues now propose that natural selection works at both gene level and the level of the group. For example, the herd, the ant colony, the tribe. Hence, a trait or behaviour that may favour an individual may disfavour or favour the group, and vice versa. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that this multi-level selection is responsible for the development of altruism in humans, because altruistic behaviour favours the group and hence the individual. Wilson points to a dynamic balance between group and individual selection as a shape of human nature. In great societal achievements, like social healthcare systems, we see a good balance. When the balance goes awry, we get a tragedy of the commons effect, such as the overfishing of the seas or, more prosaically, email spam. So how does this relate to the life sciences sector and to pricing policy in particular? Well, in the evolution of industries, the analogue of genes are organisation routines, which are sub-processes that express themselves as capabilities. Routines are selected for when they help a firm thrive in the environment and vice versa. Now, supposing the routines of a life science company that determine pricing policy mutate and lead to a much more aggressive pricing policy. The great profits enable a firm to thrive and the gene, that is the organisational routine, is selected for. Like a cow suddenly being able to eat a lot more grass or a wolf being able to catch more prey. But cows and wolves and life science companies depend for their survival on others of their species. So although the gene may favour the individual cow or wolf or company, it may disfavour the survival of the herd or the pack or the industry. We see exactly this happening with the industry's pricing policy. Although helping individual pricing firms to be more profitable, the collective use of aggressive pricing, which we can see in both generics and innovative products, risks harming the industry. If Hillary Clinton makes good on her current rhetoric and imposes price controls, it will be an environmental reaction against industry pricing policy and it will harm the whole sector. The analogy to the grass being overgrazed or the prey hunted to extinction is very clear. The practical implications of this are important to the industry and to society generally. When setting pricing policies, it is the default position of most firms to make as much profit as possible, just as a cow will eat as much grass as it can and a wolf will hunt as much prey as it can catch. But if many firms do that, their environment will respond through price controls or changing the rules and patterns. And just as environmental response is often delayed but sudden, the collapse of fish stocks for example, then peer response is likely to be deferred until there is a politically sensitive episode, children's cancer drugs for example, and that triggers a disproportionate response. And given that this is politics and press coverage we're discussing, we'd be naive to expect a measured, intelligent peer response. So how might individual life science companies change their behaviour to avoid such a tragedy of the commons? After all, they have a fiduciary duty to optimise profits. Well, there are 4 obvious actions. Firstly, they can set prices according to value delivered rather than what competition allows. Secondly, they can demonstrate and communicate that value in a transparent manner rather than make vague arguments that we need to reinvest profits. Third, we can pay special attention to the pricing of politically sensitive products. And finally, we can altruistically encourage and teach other companies in the industry to behave this way. In my research, I can see a few enlightened firms that are moving towards this long-term approach. But the danger is that we only need a few firms to visibly gouge the customer, in Hillary Clinton's words, to trigger a media-led, politically motivated and disproportionate response by their peers. That truly would be a tragedy of the commons for patients, payers and everyone else.